taking a quick break from the RSA coverage that we had from 2018. Don't worry, we're going to have a lot more of those coming out. We've got a lot more interviews that took place out at RSA to learn more about some of the technology that people were showcasing. And if you want to get just the shorts, you want to get just those interviews, you can go over to the CharlesTendellShow.com and click on the YouTube page where the videos for all of those are posted right now. You can go and check out some of the interviews with Rubicon Labs, with Juniper Networks, with Juniper Labs over Juniper Networks, and Monair Hahad. All great stuff, all great interviews, all great conversations, all fun things that we did out at RSA. And there's going to be one that's coming out that's going to be ITSP Magazine, because those guys are freaking awesome, and you should definitely check them out. But this one came from a company called LifeID, and I had a conversation with Chris Boscolo. I hope I'm not butchering his name. And the conversation centered around the way we use our technology, our devices, that it is becoming more and more useful for us to have our phones or our electronic devices that are in our pockets, just our mobile devices as we should be calling them, because they're not just phones anymore, to be able to use them to authenticate ourselves, to authenticate us as individuals and show who we are. But the underlying mechanisms behind that is still based on a technology that we're just scratching the surface on. So the scare is what happens when this technology fails. And if we are at this point, what happens? Well, are we at the point now where we are comfortable relying on technology that much? I mean, we find it in most of our phones, the same features that are out there. They now see our face, they now have our ID, they now listen to our voices. They are as much a part of us as the clothes that we wear, the cars that we drive, and the friends that we keep. So why not move this direction? But understanding the underlying technology behind that, that's a whole different question and a whole different conversation that we need to make sure we're having before implementing this technology. So I had a good conversation with Chris Boscolo. I'm messing up his name. I mess it up all the time. I'm horrible with names, but you guys know that. From LifeID. You can check them out, lifeid.io. I love the .io. It's so cool and catchy and trendy, and that's how we used to roll out there. But check out this interview with Chris from LifeID. It's a technology, again, centered around allowing our technology to start representing us and maybe one day take away from the need to carry around the Costanza wallet. I'll be right back.
Cybersecurity expert Charles Tendell.
Systemic failures that brought their whole systems down.
Charles Tendell, he's a certified ethical hacker.
Your emails, it turns out, are not nearly as private as you think.
Show really how vulnerable we are.
Charles Tendell, who deals with hackers all the time, says,
if you have to ask yourself, is this right? It probably isn't.
Welcome. So, Chris, you're new to the Charles Tendell Show. Thank you for being here today, sir.
Thank you very much for having me, Charles.
Right on, right on. So give my audience a little background. Who are you? What do you do?
Well, my name is Chris Boscolo. I'm the founder of a company called LifeID. We are building a self-sovereign identity platform for the world to use to identify themselves, both when they're logging into websites, logging into their banks, as well as just gaining access to physical properties using their iPhone or showing their identity to other people. As far as my background, I've been involved with computer security for over 20 years and have been an entrepreneur over those same 20 years. Joined a company way back in the .com era called WatchGuard Technologies, where we built internet firewalls and VPN technology. I was responsible there for that technology and the development of some leading-edge firewall technology. Did a couple other companies between then and now, one of which we built some hardware for giving secure access to computers when they got onto a network. That company actually is what bridged me into learning about Bitcoin and blockchain and kind of paved the way to leading me to building LifeID.
Nice. Now, in terms of blockchain identity and allowing people to authenticate, expand on that a little bit more. What is the problem that we're trying to solve?
Well, fundamentally, the problem we're solving is allowing users to prove who they are digitally and also physically without divulging personal information about themselves and without needing to remember passwords. So from a technology perspective, this is actually a problem we've had the technology to solve for quite some time using cryptography. What LifeID does is it combines two things. An easy-to-use mobile application that lets you use the mobile's capabilities for biometrically proving you are you to gain access to the cryptography you need to use to prove who you are online. And then there's a blockchain platform that lets you take those cryptographic keys and exchange them with other people in a way that preserves your anonymity and also trust with other parties.
Nice. So you're using technology that people are already comfortable with, say their iPhone or their Android phone, to be able to tie in with blockchain to be able to authenticate who they are as an individual.
Exactly.
Now, how does that work a little bit? I mean, are we talking like an expansion on Touch ID or Face ID or something like that?
So the capabilities of the smartphone wouldn't extend the Touch ID or anything of that nature. What we're leveraging in the smartphones is the ability to use those technologies to gain access to the private keys that represent you in the digital world. So those private keys are what end up identifying you when you go to transact with a website. So let's say, for example, you're going to log into a website that does video sharing, and you maybe only need to create a username and perhaps an email address. What you would do in the traditional world is you'd go to a form and it would ask for a username and a password. With LifeID, what you would do is you would, instead of using a username and a password, you would generate a unique ID. Your phone would generate a unique ID for you and present it to the website you're logging into, and it would use the cryptography built into the phone to prove that you are the possessor of that ID the next time you go to log in.
Okay, so it's just validating that you still have access to the same kind of keys that were out there. So it's not taking the place of, say, a password or anything else. It's giving you, it's saying once again, you are who you say you are, and now you have access to the same kind of information you had before.
Correct. Although it does replace the need for a password, because the passwords are no longer used to prove who you are.
You are used.
At least from an authentication perspective, yes. But what we're building goes a lot further than just authenticating you in a digital world. The other advantage of this style of identity is that it leverages what's called verified credentials. And verified credentials is an idea that somebody, let's say an employer has an employee working for them. The employer could generate a verified credential that signs the employee's unique identifier to say they are indeed employee of ours. And they then give those verified credentials to the employee. Let's say the employee is going to fill out a rental application for an apartment. When they go to fill that rental application out, they will, and let's pretend that it's a web-based interface. They will go to a web-based interface with that rental company, and instead of passing on a letter that they received from their employer saying that they're an employee, they would pass on this cryptographically signed verified claim from the employer. In addition to just claiming that the individual is an employee of that company, it may also use some technology called zero-knowledge proofs to prove that the person that's presenting this claim to the rental company earns an income over, say, X dollars. Perhaps the rental company requires for that apartment that you earn more than $1,500 a month. So the person showing the credentials to that rental company could send them a proof that the employer assigned saying, indeed, their income is greater than $1,500 a month without actually revealing their actual income. So that's the turning the identity problem on its head part of the solution, which is instead of, Equifax and all of these central credit and identity bureaus holding all this information about you, You hold it all about yourself through these signed, verified credentials, and you present them to the entity you want to present them to. And it uses cryptography to prove that those credentials, it did indeed come from the entity you said they came from.
Okay. Now, how do you, so in the same concept, like if I were a student and I wanted to be able to verify some transcripts or something, and we were using your tool, I would be able to say, here are my transcripts, here is the electronic signature or electronic verification from Umpty Smunch School. This is my ID, and that would have to be something that would be classified as valid because of the way the checks and balances would be done otherwise. So it depends on a trusted relationship between you and the verification authority, I guess?
Correct. Yeah. So in that scenario, the school would be the one that is the issuer of the claim or the issuer of the transcript. So they would be the one signing them. And then they would sign them and give them to the student, and the student would be in possession of them, and the student would choose who they're going to show them to.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, how do you get around the potential for fraud there? Like, how does the person who's receiving this verified piece of information, how do they know that it's coming from a trusted source versus just you got something that looks legitimate?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the verifying party, the one that's validating this information, they do need to be certain. They have to ahead of time have a business trust relationship with the issuer of the credential. Mm-hmm. So, for example, if it's a university transcript, the verifier would have to trust that university exists and have a trust relationship with them. They would be able to go to the LifeID platform, to the blockchain, to look up the university's public identifier that they push for the whole world to confirm that the public keys used to sign those transcripts are indeed the ones that are possessed by that university, so that somebody couldn't fraudulently impersonate the university unless they were able to possess the private keys used by the university to sign those transcripts.
Okay. So as long as the person who's requesting some sort of validation has a previous relationship with, say, the university or the credit agency or something like that, in the example you gave of being a rental application or something like that, in order for them to be able to capitalize on this, they have to have a trusted relationship with the previous party.
Yeah, or at a minimum, it doesn't have to be a pre-existing relationship, but they would have to confirm the trust. They would have to confirm that trust relationship. In the rental example that I said before, and I've been through this a couple times with employees, and so I'm aware of, they come to me and they say, we need a letter that says I'm an employee and I earn this amount of money because I'm going to go apply for an apartment. The apartment company probably prior to that application had never heard of our company that signed that letter. So when they receive the letter, they have to make a business judgment call that, do I want to trust that this company is real and that this is a legitimate thing? So what they would do is they would go look it up on the blockchain to see information about that company, and it might have like their URL, their address, and they could do other things to fact check that company is indeed the one that signed that employment verification. But that would be a business trust relationship that might have to be established at the moment the transaction is happening.
Okay. So let's unpack a little bit of the technology. Now, there's mention. I mean, I've got in my notes that this works with blockchain. Where does that come in?
Yeah. So, let's start off. Are you familiar with PGP and how this is the old technology, but how people used PGP to send encrypted email to each other?
Mm-hmm. They exchange their various keys, and there has to be either a key authority involved, or I'm going to give you my keys to be able to show you in real life that I am who I say I am, and from that point, the software does what it needs to.
Exactly. And so PGP, these building blocks for this what we call self-sovereign identity have actually been around quite a while, and the piece that has been missing to allow us to use this cryptography to develop an identity solution that from the ground up can be trustworthy is an ability for us to coordinate the use of these public identifiers. And that's where the blockchain comes in. So I get to generate my own identifiers. And the other difference with PGP is that with self-sovereign identity, one of the things we do is we don't generate just one identifier that we exchange with the whole world, but we will generate one for each relationship we have. And the reason we do this is to minimize the amount of correlation that could be done by the parties we give these keys to. If it's a public identifier, that's not a big issue. Like, for example, a company's, you can think of as a public website or SSL cert for that company, but it only needs that one identifier. But for a private individual with many relationships, they would want to potentially generate many unique identifiers that they give to each one of those organizations. So if someone were to break into all those organizations and compare the data of who's logged in, there would be no correlation of identifiers from one individual across multiple organizations. So the part the blockchain helps with then is the ability for us to coordinate turning those identifiers into the actual public keys that represent that person. And so what I can do as an individual using this, think of that blockchain platform as a global public utility that anyone can use and is always running because it's built on a blockchain mechanism that has built-in incentives to keep it running. I can create a unique identifier to me using my software that I downloaded off the iTunes App Store on my iPhone or Google Play or whatever. And then I register that identity on this public utility to indicate what the actual public keys are that represent that identity. And that way, if I either lose the keys or if somehow, somebody manages to insert a virus into my phone or whatever and get access to those keys, I have a mechanism, because that's part of what the blockchain platform that we're building allows for, to update those keys using some entity other than my smartphone. And so what the purpose for that blockchain identity platform is to serve as the coordinating point when I hand my identifier to somebody else, for them to go look up and make sure that they know the most up-to-date public key that it represents. And they can also, it does a little bit more than that. They can also check, there's a revocation list that makes sure that key hasn't been revoked. So in that scenario I just presented, where I might have to actually revoke my keys because they've been compromised in some way, I would add them to the revocation list, and that would be on the blockchain as well. So the blockchain serves as a central coordination point, and the blockchain technology gives us the ability to have mechanisms for updating those public keys using something other than the original keys I used to create them.
Okay, now let me make sure I'm following you on this one. So blockchain is now used the underlying portion of the blockchain is used to validate what steps that they took or communications that were there, just basically behavioral traits as a check the block. And then the end of whatever path that is with blockchain, as long as all of those, for lack of a better term, as long as those bits line up, the authentication is considered valid and you're allowed access to whatever it is that you need? Or is blockchain being used as the signing authority itself?
Think of the latter. Think of the blockchain as the signing authority itself. It's definitely not tracking any behavior from the user or anything like that. The only thing stored, because it is a public open network that anybody can read. So you would not want to store anything private or personal to you, especially behavior data or anything that might identify you. You're just storing these, cryptographic keys that are just opaque identifiers. And the blockchain is basically exactly serving as a signing authority for those keys.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, how is
it's basically the... Oh, sorry. I was going to say it's basically the trust root anchor for bootstrapping this identity system.
Okay. Now, what are the fail-safe mechanisms? I mean, this tie-in to blockchain. Is it considered completely infallible? Is there a way for it to muck up? And if it does, what happens when it fails?
So there's a couple different types of failures that we think about. Most of them being user-centered, and so I won't talk about the cryptography failures, because there are obviously concerns about someday will this cryptography be broken or things of that nature. Which that is always a possibility. I think most of us operate under the premise that it could happen, but we still are building our circular systems with this cryptographic technology that we assume is pretty bulletproof for now. And there's a couple decades of research into this, so we know that it's pretty safe. But most of the failures tend to center around user errors. For example, you lose your keys, or the other failures that often we need to think about are the malicious actors that manage to get software into the user experience. Think of it in the form of maybe a virus or things of that nature that expose data right at the point that you're transacting with it as a user on your computer or phone. And so what we've built is the ability for the user to update the keys that are on the blockchain using a couple different mechanisms that the user gets to choose. One mechanism might be a backup key that they've stored offline. It's not online anywhere, but they are maintained possession of. There's a lot of people that come from the people that are involved with trading crypto and whatnot are very concerned about letting anyone else manage their keys because it represents a lot of money for them. And so those type of individuals would want to always be in full possession of backup credentials that they would use. For other people that maybe don't have that level of paranoia about their keys, might choose a trusted authority like a bank to be their backup. So in that scenario, the user experience would be that maybe you show up in person at the bank with telling them that you've been compromised, your keys have been compromised, you need to reset your identity cryptographic keys are being stored on the blockchain, and so you prove who you are in person to the person at the bank with your new app that's going to be your wallet to transact your identities in the future, and they reset the keys on the blockchain so that you can now use your identity again. And then in a third scenario, similar to that trusted third party, you might actually choose to give 5 friends a little tiny bit of your backup recovery key, and then to recover your identities, you would maybe choose 3 of those 5 friends, and show them your phone, download a new app, show your phone to your friends. They would maybe scan a QR code that's on your phone, and it would recover your keys for you. So those are some of the ways we have for recovering keys for what would be users, either failure that caused them to lose them, or like I said, if they were compromised, would give you the ability to recover them.
Wow. Okay. Now this all sounds like a really technical way to kind of evolve our current identification system. Like right now, we're all when you turn 18 or when you turn 16, depending on what state you're in, you're issued an identification card, and you have to go to a central authority, the DMV, and everything else. It sounds like this might be positioned to turn that card into a collection of ones and zeros on our phone. Is that where we're headed with this?
That's exactly where we're headed. And the beauty of it, is we get to not have to carry around all these cards in our wallet. But the other benefit for us, the users, is that it's going to create a world where we can actually create online accounts, for example, using the credentials that were issued to us by maybe a government agency in a way that's cryptographically proven to be safe.
No.
And so that it will streamline a lot of like account setups and things of that nature.
Now, when we say allows you to be safe, like the first thing that pops into my head, the elections are coming, all these other things are out there, and there's this current feeling or belief in the world that there are people who just can't get access to being able to vote. They can't do it, they can't get there physically, or they don't have identification to do so. To me, I hear this and I think we would be able to not only create an identification that now electronically validates essentially all of our online accounts. So if we were to apply this to an ID for, say, Facebook, now that Facebook account is directly tied to and verified with Charles Tendell. It is my account. It is guaranteed to be mine. Would it be strong enough to then say, hey, let's use this to vote and actually count it electronically and be able to enable everyone to be able to pick up their smartphone and be able to say, yep, next president of the United States I think should be this person?
The answer to that is absolutely. In fact, we've already started discussions with a few partners that are trying to solve that exact problem for allowing you to use this digital identity to vote in elections. We're probably, several years away from that becoming a reality, but we are definitely on that path, and it's really exciting.
No, with the excitement about it, because me personally, I would love to live in a world where right now we can order anything we want to our homes from our phone. We can buy tickets, we can do traveling, we can virtually exist everywhere, and our online profiles have become more of our avatar than we are. It's really cool to meet people in real life, but you meet so many more people electronically, and I'm looking forward to living in a world where I can actually interact with it in a more verified manner, especially to be able to vote in that. However, how does this work with, how do you prevent things like, my phone got stolen, or my friend now has control of my phone? We used to play jokes when I was at Boeing where, if you messed around and you left your computer unlocked, it was possible you were going to send an email about how you liked cake and a few other things to the whole company.
Yeah, that's a really important thing to consider. And there's two parts to that story. One part is what I'd mentioned previously, which is at the end of the day, your digital identity is you transact it with your phone, but the blockchain is where the ability for you to recover should you lose your keys happens using all of those methods that I talked about before. So if you did get your phone stolen or somehow somebody managed to get access to that, you could go and initiate those steps to change the keys used that represent you to your new software that you downloaded. So that we've already talked about. But more tangibly, like in the immediate time frame, is on most phones, access to the actual ability to sign those transactions, get access to those public keys, requires some biometric verification for you to unlock that part of the phone. And this is technology that we aren't specifically developing. This is obviously technology that the likes of Apple and other major manufacturers are working on. But the phones themselves are getting much, much better at only allowing the user of the phone through biometrics to unlock the phone. Mm-hmm. So if you look at it from our trust model is we assume it's possible always to break the phone and break into the phone, and so we don't rely on that being the most important part of the trusted. If you think of this as sort of security in layers or defense in depth, that's not the only thing that prevents your digital identity from being stolen. At the end of the day, you can always go to your recovery steps that you've set up when you registered these identifiers on the blockchain.
Nice. I'm still fantasizing about a world where our technology is what is representing us even more so. And part of me, the paranoid person in me, while I'm welcoming it and I'm looking forward to the day that we can rely on it a little heavier, I always want to know where those fail-safes are going to be. What happens when the technology doesn't work the way it's supposed to? You can't get into your phone or anything like that, what the backups are going to be. But it sounds like there's going to be a lot of things there. Well, Chris, we're going to run out of time here on the Charles Tendell Show, and I like to give my guests the opportunity to tell everybody how to get a hold of them, where they can learn more about them. Where can they learn more about you and LifeID?
Well, thanks for asking, and thanks for having me, Charles. I really appreciated this time. You can learn more about LifeID by going to lifeid.io. And there you can also subscribe for our newsletter and follow us on Twitter. Our Twitter account is listed there. So if you just remember lifeid.io, you can get all of that information.
Excellent, Chris. Well, it has been a pleasure talking to you, sir, and I want to look forward to learning more about you and LifeID. So thank you again for your time, and I look forward to having you back some point.
Thank you very much, Charles. It was really fun talking to you.
My pleasure. Bye-bye.
Bye.